you.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you all for coming. And let me give a special welcome to all the distinguished guests joining us from around the world, including two heads of state who have both been global leaders in pushing for more cooperation and partnership on clean energy. President Ruto of Kenya and Prime Minister Motley of Barbados. A nice round of applause for both of them. Let me also welcome European Commission President von der Leyen. A nice round of applause for her. Thank you all. There's an awful lot of people here from business and government and nonprofits that are really going to make a difference in the world. Everyone in this group is doing important work to move the world away from fossil fuels and towards clean energy. And this is a great opportunity for us to forge new ground. Many of us were together at COP28 in Dubai, where world leaders agreed to triple global renewable energy capacity by the year 2030. And today, Bloomberg NEF released a new report outlining the progress we're making towards that goal. In short, it says we are moving in the right direction, but not fast enough. And that's especially true in the developing countries that have contributed the least to climate change, but are facing the greatest risks. To put it in perspective, Africa receives only 3% of global energy investment. And while investment in solar power has skyrocketed, investment in modern electric grids and power storage are far behind where they must be. Not enough investment is flowing to the new wind power. That's just the bottom line, and we have to do something about it. In other words, we are falling behind in a race that we just can't lose. We can change that, but only if we work together and find ways to knock down the barriers that stand in the way of investment. We have every incentive to do it. Each new investment in solar and wind power helps to save lives by cleaning the air that we breathe. Investment in clean energy also helps to drive economic growth and create new jobs in an industry that is poised to continue growing rapidly. At Bloomberg Philanthropies, we're committed to doing our part to unleash more of that investment. And we've seen how much progress is possible through work that we started here in the United States. Through the Beyond Coal campaign, we've helped to close more than 70% of the U.S. coal power plants, and more than half in Europe. Just think about that. When you say you can't do anything, we've done it. Based on that success, we're expanding our work to more than 30 other countries around the world. And a key focus of that work has been in climate finance. We're supporting partnerships between governments, multilateral development banks, philanthropy, and the private sector to break down silos, unlock more financing for clean energy. The summit is a testament to our shared belief in the importance of that kind of collaboration. And I want to thank all of our partners, including everyone who is part of the Global Renewable Alliance. And let me once again thank all of you for joining us today and for all you're doing to keep us moving forward. It's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, one of the world's most influential leaders and a trailblazer too, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and she was the first woman to be elected to the presidency. You should know she became the first person ever to be re-elected to the presidency, and no wonder because she's done a great job. She's been a steady hand helping to Europe through many difficult challenges, from the pandemic to the invasion of the Ukraine and the energy crisis that it caused. She's been a champion for trade and economic cooperation at a time of increased protectionism, and she's been instrumental to Europe's continuing leadership on climate change. She is an outstanding partner to countries around the world making to achieve ambitious goals for clean energy development and grow their economies at the same time. In 2023, she called on world leaders to triple renewable energy capacity and double energy efficiency, which helped set the stage for the historic commitments made at COP28. She's also been an important partner to Bloomberg Philanthropies through the Global Covenant of Mayors, the initiative that we run with the European Commission, which is helping more than 13,000 cities design local climate action plans. So we're great and glad to have her with us. Please join me in welcoming Ursula to the stage. Ursula?
Thank you very much, Mike. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, it all started in March 2023 with an idea. It was the idea, or rather the vision together with the International Energy Agency, of a global movement that would help us stay within the 1.5 degrees Celsius and push the clean energy transition forward. So we proposed global targets to triple renewables and to double energy savings by 2030. We wanted quantifiable targets, because only what gets measured gets done. And at COP28, the world rallied behind this goal thanks to a coalition of 135 countries, and thanks to the leadership of a core group of motivated partners. I'm very happy to see many of them here today. Dear Sultan Al Jaber as COP28 President, dear President Ruto, dear Prime Minister Motley. Together, we succeeded in turning the idea into a common goal, and I really thank you for the excellent cooperation that was out there. It was one of these rare moments where you had the impression the world feels united as one. It has even been called the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era. And today we must keep this spirit alive, the spirit of COP28. And for this, we must double down on implementation collectively to reach these targets. I see 4 areas of action. First is planning. The second and the third, the fourth, I'll allude in a moment, but let's have a look at what the governments should do. Governments should now integrate our global ambition in their national climate plans, showing how they intend to contribute to the global targets in the current decade. And that's what we're doing now in the European Union. We raised our renewable energy target for 2030 to more than 42% of our mix, and we're getting there. In the first half of this year, 50% of our electricity generation came from renewables, 50%. But we also know, of course, that the work is far from being done. And this leads me to my second point. We need to improve the business environment. We must create the right incentives and conditions for clean energy tech to thrive. And we all know what is needed in Europe and what is needed globally. First, a solid regulatory framework so that investments are safe and secure. Second, state-of-the-art infrastructure and faster permitting procedures. The permitting procedures are too slow. We have to get fast on that one. Third, lead markets that create demand for sustainable products, services, and technologies. And finally, we need the right skills to match the demand. So we must work on all these priorities at once. This is what I have set to do with my new commission, now with a new mandate from 2024 to 2029. And we are ready to work on this with our international partners. My third point is on access and supply of critical raw materials. Working towards our targets will increase the demand for these minerals. and we must make sure that sourcing and mining are done in a way that benefits all, in a sustainable way. And this is why the Secretary General's panel on critical energy transition minerals has my full support. As co-chairs of the panel, we will continue working for robust supply chains, diversified supply chains that are transparent, sustainable, and fair throughout. And my final point is on investments. The clean energy transition requires massive investments everywhere in the world. And this is especially true of countries and regions where there is a lack of affordable energy and capital, and where costs are so high that it is an obstacle to electrification. Yes, we need public finance. It will play a crucial role in pushing the clean energy transition forward. Europe will keep doing its fair share. In 2022, with our Global Engagement Investment Strategy, Team Europe mobilized 28 billion euros in public funding to support emerging countries in reducing emissions and adapt to climate change. We do not only provide grants, we also use European public funds to de-risk investments and have a multiplier effect. Because it is very clear that public funding won't be enough to achieve our global goals. We need to start aligning all global financial flows with the Paris Agreement. And this means mobilizing private capital too. And we can help in doing that. Because when we, as governments or international organizations, set global targets for renewables, we also set the future course for business as well. It's the clear direction of travel. When we develop de-risking instruments, we strengthen the business case for clean investments. And when we give public support to breakthrough innovation, we facilitate their uptake in the market. And I'm sure that representatives of the private sector are also ready to embark on this journey. So my basic call is, let's gear up towards COP29. It will be the place and the time to showcase new products, new projects that support our targets, show the ambition. Let us fill the global pledges with life. I thank you for your attention.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, the President of Kenya, William Ruto. As president of one of Africa's largest economies, his leadership is critical, and he has been one of the world's strongest voices for action on climate change. Last year, he hosted the inaugural Africa Climate Summit, where a total of $23 billion was committed towards projects to stem climate change across the continent. At COP28, he announced an ambitious initiative to speed up clean energy investment in Africa and to cut emissions from heavy industries. Kenya, you should know, already has one of the world's cleanest electrical grids, and President Ruto has pledged to achieve 100% clean energy by 2030. And that sets an example, a great example for countries across Africa and around the world. So I want to thank him for all his leadership, and we are honored to have him with us today. Please join me in welcoming President Ruto.
Thank you very much, Mike. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to co-host this Global Renewables Summit with a group of like-minded partners. This is a timely and consequential event as we seek to translate a big vision into action. We made significant progress at COP28 under the leadership of my brother here from the UAE, notably with a commitment to triple global renewable energy capacity and double energy efficiency by 2030. Last year's inaugural Africa Climate Summit was an important step towards COP28. African heads of state adopted the Nairobi Declaration with climate-positive growth as a new paradigm for industrialization and development. A key pillar of this future is Africa's vast and underutilized renewable energy resources. In this room, we know the reality of a global disparity in energy access. Nearly 600 million Africans lack access to electricity, while another 1 billion are without clean cooking options. In sub-Saharan Africa, annual energy access gains of around 30 million people barely keep pace with a population growth of 28 million people each year. So you balance the number of people that are coming into the space with those that are getting electricity, it means we are running on a treadmill. This trend imperils progress across the entire Sustainable Development Goals on agenda and also imperils our Paris Agreement goals. This week, we adopted the Pact of the Future to improve our world. It requires our commitment to implement and realize the ambitions of the Pact. We will continue to push for a course correction of the global financial and investment gaps and the unfair financial systems. Africa receives less than 2%. Sometimes it's say 3% of global investment in renewable energy, despite being home to 60% of the world's best solar opportunities. Last year, the continent added less than 3 gigawatts of renewable energy, while the world saw a record addition of nearly 500 gigawatts. So, 3 gigawatts with a potential of 60%. That tells you the disparity. Africa must pursue industrialization and economic growth to tackle the crippling energy poverty. Although the continent is resource-rich, unreliable or expensive energy limits our ability to harness these resources for development. High capital costs and economies of scale mean that investors require secure offtake agreements as a mechanism of de-risking their investment. Establishing anchor industrial demand driven by energy-intensive industries is crucial for securing these investments. We have a significant opportunity as the world to seek and expand and diversify value chains, particularly for energy transition. However, not all industrial development is beneficial. Historically, exploitation of Africa's resources has not yielded benefits for its people. We must avoid repeating these mistakes of the past. And that is why we have made a decision as African heads of state to re-engineer the Africa Union. I have been mandated by my colleagues to reform the institutions of the Africa Union so that we can make it fit for purpose, give ourselves voice, and do the right things to attract investment in spaces that are important, as in climate action. This is why I am also driving the Africa Green Industrialization Initiative, which we launched at COP28, and now advancing with a group of global leaders this week. Expanding energy is critical for Africa Green Industrialization Initiative's agenda. Next month, together with IRENA, we are hosting the first accelerated partnership for renewables in Africa. That forum in Nairobi, and we look forward to hosting many of you. Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue our discussion on mobilizing finance, it is also important that we keep this approach in mind and focus on both supply of and demand for renewable energy at the forefront. By doing so, we can unlock ideas, partnerships, and approaches expanding our range of solutions. With Africa's unmatched climate competitiveness, we can offer global solutions that grow our economies, create jobs, and dignified livelihoods. We can generate healthy financial returns. Let me repeat that. We can generate healthy financial returns. I know there are people here listening. But we need systems and tools that truly work for Africa and by extension for the world. The world has the means and technologies needed to achieve the tripling goal by 2030. But there are numerous pathways to reach this target. Without a deliberate, a disciplined, and honest approach, the development divide may widen. The power of choice is in our hands, literally and figuratively. Let's wield it wisely and make it count. I thank you.
And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley. In addition to collaborating on climate change, we work together on a task force that is taking action to reduce deaths from non-communicable diseases like heart diseases and diabetes. And just this morning, we announced a new report at an event here at the Plaza. She's also been a powerful advocate for clean energy and for island nations and developing countries that are on the front lines of climate change. Through the Bridgetown Initiative, she has pushed for reforms to development banks to help fill the financial gaps in developing countries. She's also leading by example by putting Barbados on track to phase out all fossil fuels by 2030. So I want to thank her for all of her leadership and partnership. Please join me in welcoming Prime Minister Mottley.
Thank you very much, Mike. To my dear brother, President Ruto, President von der Leyen, Sultan Al-Jaber, our new president of COP29, let me say how pleased I am to be here to speak this morning on this Global Renewables Summit. But I'm going to ask us to pause a minute because at the same time that we are speeding towards this target, we have the reality of a doubling of fossil fuel subsidies. And at the same time, those fossil fuel subsidies are 10 times that which exists for renewable energy. Equally, in small states, we face the reality that the cost of renewable energy supplying electricity to our citizens will probably be higher than the traditional use of fossil fuels. It therefore means that we need to have some difficult conversations that really ought now to be put on the table. We have a deficit in terms of capacity, particularly as it relates to regulation. Ursula, one of the things that you insisted on in your speech was that the regulatory framework is critical to our being able to reach the target. Permitting is critical. But most small states don't have the level of skills necessary to create that regulatory framework easily. So while we speak to the urgent need for financing as we continue to do with the Bridgetown Initiative, and while we push for greater amounts to be applied there, not just of public money, but of other money and public-private approaches, we have to also come to grips with the reality that there are some non-financial issues that can also undermine our ability to reach this target. The absence of that capacity within the framework of regulation is one. The second one, and Sultan, I think we have spoken about this in the past, relates to the procurement. We learned in COVID very easily if we ever forgot it, that we were small. Because the orders that we will place will not even attract the attention of those who want to just clean up the storerooms. Our orders, therefore, will have to find a mechanism for pooled procurement if we are going to be serious about allowing small states to reach the objective of wanting to phase out fossil fuels and wanting to increase our reliance on renewable energy. But it's not just the pooled procurement. We may have to look also at pooled investment in regions. The reality is that in the Caribbean, there are certain countries that would like to move faster, but we have the opportunity for significant capacity in solar, wind, geothermal, and a number of other renewables. Bottom line is, however, that each investment will probably not attract any attention from you, Mike, because it's probably too small. But if we take the investments and pool them collectively and look for collective offtake agreements, then perhaps we can begin to catapult the level of speed that we need in order to reach 2030. Forgive me if I have spoken about these practical matters this morning, but if we are serious about reaching the 2030 agreement, the targets for 2030, then we have to be practical with respect to these other issues. I come now, before I close, to the issue of financing. We cannot continue to believe that money is just going to come out of the air. It is not. And while we accept that there has to be far greater utilization of domestic financing than has been discussed thus far, the reality is that it is the partnership between foreign and domestic capital that is going to get us there. Most of our countries are borrowing at rates that are just not sustainable. And that is why the JET-B projects, wonderfully announced in Glasgow, really have not gotten off the ground with the pace that we expected it to. I want to salute President Banga from the World Bank for agreeing to introduce more 50-year loans for climate vulnerable countries to be able to help us get part of the way. I want to salute Kristalina for introducing the Resilience and Sustainability Trust, which allows many of us to be able to start to plan out our way, but even then it is limited. And in our own case in Barbados, we've used a significant portion of those funds to partner with the Latin American Development Bank, the Green Climate Fund, the United States USAID, and indeed Guyana and Bahamas, to be able to establish for the first time a blue-green investment bank in the Eastern and Southern Caribbean that will be a market maker to help close the gap with respect to some of the financing. But even with those things that I've called out and congratulated those persons, we are still not anywhere near where we need to be. In Paris last year at the Paris Pact for People and Planet, we discussed, William, the fact that we are not making sufficient pace. We're not moving with sufficient speed, and we are not moving on a broad enough front. Sultan, you have been able to add significantly to the global financing with the establishment of Altera. But the reality is that we are not yet near there. And my fear is that we say the same thing year after year after year, but the only difference is that the temperature keeps getting higher and higher, and the consequences of our failure to act with speed become real in so many parts of the world that have not yet hitherto been exposed to it. We have a moral obligation to get the financing right. And the next day, we will put out Bridgetown 3.0, which takes into account the progress we've made, but sets clearly still the ambitions that we must reach if we are going to be serious about enabling persons to reach the targets for the Global Renewable Summits, while at the same time not forgetting that the broad sustainable development goals must be our target, because we are not one-issue people. We might end up saving ourselves from doom from the planet, but then dying from something else like chronic non-communicable diseases that have overtaken our populations. So what is important is a holistic approach to finance, holistic approach to project preparation and project execution. I started with the regulatory and the procurement and the investment because too often people believe that finance is the destination. And because we have spent so much time on the Bridgetown Initiative, I know that we may have contributed to that because finance is one of the biggest issues, but it is not the only issue. And settling and solving the finance will not cause our citizens to be able to benefit from renewable energy tomorrow because there is still a project preparation and a project execution capacity that Ursula referred to so appropriately. I hope, Mike, that this ability to bring us together, using your convening power to be able to have persons to apply their hearts and minds to these difficult and complex challenges will mean that small island states will not be omitted from the preparation and the investment that can take place. We are often ignored because our scale is simply too small. But may I remind you that small can also be dangerous. And the most dangerous animal known to all of us, or living organism known to all of us, is a mosquito. And therefore, we ought not to ignore what potentially can be done across 1/4 of the world's states that actually are small island states today. Part of the difficulty is the duplicity of policy and the duplicity of approach. I say so not proudly, but recognizing that if I want to do carbon credits in Guyana, I will get probably 1/10 of what I could get in Europe for them. There has to be a better approach to build trust across the world on so many of these issues. If we can make progress on these multiple fronts, then we will come to be successful in 2030. If we don't, then we are going to pay the price of failure. And those who pay the price perhaps are not in this room. They're the people whose voices and whose faces are not heard and not seen respectively. And our solemn obligation as leaders here is to ensure that they are not going to be put on the front line of either our failure to alter the status quo or to summon the courage to make the changes that are necessary at this most pivotal time in the world's history. I am here because I believe we can do it. I am here because I have confidence in the fact that this pathway creates jobs, creates opportunities, and ultimately secures hope at the very time when the world needs hope more than ever. I thank you, therefore, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you, recognizing, however, our limitations as small states and hoping that the partnerships will not only be in public and private sector for large countries, but also for small states. And I make one last point. If we don't find mechanisms as well to tap into the domestic capital so that they become owners of what we will bring about with this green transition, we will turn people who live as proud, independent citizens into tenants in their own land again. We have not set on this journey to recolonize our people, but in fact to liberate them from a planet that is effectively in great crisis. Let us therefore do the right thing, but see people and hear people so that they can be part and parcel of the solution the world over. Thank you.
When the Secretary General of the United Nations called and told me that he had selected one of the largest oil exporters in the world as the host country for COP28, I thought he was what we in New York would call a little bit meshuggah. That means crazy for those of you that don't live here. But he did, and he picked somebody, the country picked somebody to represent them and do the job of pulling it all together. as the president of COP28, and that person is Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber. Under his leadership, last year's COP led to unprecedented commitments on clean energy, methane, heavy industry, and other critical pieces in the battle against climate change. COP28, you should know, was also the first UN climate conference to have an official summit for cities, states, and regions where the people live. This was an important step forward, and Dr. Sultan deserves a lot of credit for helping to make it possible. Together, we hosted the Local Climate Action Summit, which highlighted the work mayors and other local leaders are doing, and the need for greater partnership across all levels of government. And now he's been working closely with the leaders of the next two COP conferences to ensure that they build on momentum from Dubai and help fulfill the commitment we made there. He's become a good friend of mine. We were lucky to have him, and we're looking forward to the help from him for a lot of things going forward. Please welcome Dr. Sultan.
Thank you very much, Mike, for your kind introduction. And I must say that the success that was achieved at COP28 was due to the fact that we had adopted a completely different approach, an approach that was centered around inclusivity, and an approach that have allowed for everyone to participate, and it also provided a platform for the world to unite, to act, and to deliver. And it was that platform that have enabled me to prove the skeptics wrong and to inspire the optimists and who were really genuine in helping advance our efforts in achieving such an unprecedented result at COP28. Allow me to use this opportunity to acknowledge everyone here in this room and beyond for your contributions and for your support and for your guidance throughout the preparations and the lead up to COP28. Without your support, without your guidance, it would not have been possible for us to achieve such an unprecedented outcome at COP28. Let me also use this opportunity to recognize our partners in this very important event, and in particular here, the EU Commission, Barbados, the governments of Brazil, Kenya, the COP29 presidency, and many other organizations that have contributed immensely to the success and the progress made thus far. The theme of this summit, driving action to triple renewable energy, could not be more timely or more critical. As you know, tripling renewable energy capacity by 2030 was one of the key outcomes of the historic, most comprehensive, balanced, practical, pragmatic, and very ambitious set of outcomes adopted at COP28, known as the UAE consensus. Tripling renewable energy capacity is not just a benchmark, it is, in fact, an essential enabler of all global efforts to keep 1.5 within reach, advance sustainable prosperity, and it will make sure that no one is left behind. Excellencies, friends, distinguished guests, over the last 20 years, renewable energy capacity has grown 8 times, while costs have dropped by 80%. In fact, the average cost of solar power just reached a new low of 4 cents per kilowatt hour. That is basically cheaper than many other forms of energy available today. The trends are actually moving in the right direction. They're just not moving fast enough or with the scale that is desperately needed. We urgently need to invest in 3 key areas. We must invest in grid infrastructure, AI, and the Global South. In many industrialized countries, the electricity grids are over 65 years old. And in many parts of the Global South, there are no grids at all. This is where governments must act. This is where governments must step up. All countries should include specific renewable energy and infrastructure targets in their upcoming NDCs. They should put policies in place that incentivize private investors. And they should streamline permitting, and ask someone who's been implementing renewable energy for the past 20 years, is a critical success factor. In too many places, the pace of permitting is like driving with handbrakes on, when we need to, in fact, be accelerating down the highway in order for us to be able to meet such ambitious targets. AI has been talked about in every single room today. AI is, in fact, real. AI is changing the pace of change across every industry, and AI can help unlock the 2 key challenges faced by renewable energy, and that is intermittency and storage. AI can integrate baseload and renewable energy sources to minimize emissions. It can predict peaks and dips in usage, and it can extend battery life. The faster we apply AI to the energy sector, the faster its benefits can be scaled. Friends and colleagues, the opportunity of sustainable economic prosperity through smarter, greener growth has never been greater. And time has come for us to stop perceiving the investment in renewable energy as a liability or only as a cost. In fact, it is very profitable, and we should view it as the new comprehensive, holistic, new economic development program that will ensure sustainable prosperity worldwide. Some of the worlds are not seeing a fair share of the opportunity at hand when it comes to deploying renewable energy at scale. Right now, over 120 developing countries attract less than 15% of global renewable energy investment. The international financial institutions must step up. They must shift gears, and they must make finance more available, more accessible, and more importantly, more affordable. And private finance must be incentivized through innovative blended models. The Africa Green Investment Initiative, launched last year by the UAE in partnership with our friends and colleagues in Kenya, is one example of this approach. The initiative has combined development and private capital from the UAE to target 25 projects across 14 African nations in partnership with Africa 50. Another example is Altera, the world's first catalytic private investment vehicle devoted and entirely dedicated to climate solutions. Launched at COP28, Altera's $30 billion fund has now deployed already in only 8 months $6.5 billion across mature and emerging targets, targeting 40 gigawatt of clean power. There is much more to do to fill the clean power development gap in the Global South, and I couldn't agree more with Prime Minister Motley that we are taking the necessary steps, we are taking big steps but much more needs to happen. Here, I'd like to encourage all parties to explore all new models, all solutions, and of course, in collaboration with like-minded partners. Business as usual cannot and will not help us deliver against our ambitious goals. We need to be smart, we need to correct course, and we need to change the game. Distinguished guests, to make the advances we need in the time available, business must think differently in order for us to be able to deliver. We need a new model of engagement that will drive public and private partnership to a completely new level. We need a true spirit of solidarity that brings everyone to the table. And we need a renewed sense of positivity. Allow me to repeat. We need a renewed sense of positivity that views spending on renewables as an investment and that will bring significant returns. Being negative will get us nowhere. We will just continue to spin the wheel. Let's think positive, let's think bigger, and let's act bolder. Let's lead the race towards a cleaner, greener world, and let us act now, and let us again unite, let us act, and let us deliver. I'm very much counting on the momentum of COP28 continuing on to COP29, and from there, through the Troika arrangement to COP30. I thank you all for your support.
Our next speaker is the president of the upcoming COP29, Muta Babayev. He is presiding over COP at a critical moment in the battle against climate change. As we all know, nations are working to update their goals and raise their ambitions as they're required to in the lead up to COP30 next year in Brazil. This year, COP will rightly have a special focus on climate finance, which is a central piece of the puzzle. So we're glad to have him with us here today and looking forward to working together in the months ahead. Please welcome COP29 President Babayev.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to join you today at this critical summit. We extend our deep gratitude to the Global Renewables Alliance, Bloomberg Philanthropies, and all partners for convening us. Dear colleagues, the UE consensus at COP28 marked a significant achievement and laid a strong foundation for the work ahead. To deliver on its calls on energy transitions in a just and orderly manner, we must rapidly scale up the renewable energy systems of the future. These issues are deeply interconnected. We must now work together to put in place the enabling conditions to implement the targets of the global stocktake. The COP29 Action Agenda has placed a strong emphasis on energy, and we have developed a series of initiatives designed to accelerate the implementation of renewable energy transition based on the decisions that have been taken in Dubai. The Green Energy Zones and Corridors Declaration aims to promote investments, stimulate economic growth, and foster regional cooperation in renewable energy development. This will allow us to maximize generation in suitable areas and support cost-effective transmission over large distance and across borders. The Global Energy Storage and Grids Pledge sets an ambitious target to increase global energy storage capacity to 1.5 thousand gigawatts by 2030, 6 times above 2022 levels. It also commits to scaling up investments in grids and or upgrade more than 80 million kilometers by 2040. This will be essential to ensure adequate storage capacity and the stability of grids, both of which are key enablers for the effective storage and reliable transition of renewable energy. The Hydrogen Declaration then seeks to unlock the potential of a global market for clean hydrogen and its byproducts. This will be crucial to decarbonizing hard-to-reduce sectors and developing storage solutions. As excess energy can be used to produce green hydrogen. These initiatives aim to take some of the next logical steps in the implementation of the UAE consensus. They recognize that while the cost of renewables may be fallen dramatically, we must provide further policy support to create flexible business models for a clean energy future. We therefore call upon all relevant stakeholders from the public and private sectors to endorse those declarations and send strong market signals. We must also work across both the supply and demand side of global energy markets. Within the COP29 action agenda, we are engaging with a range of private sector stakeholders to help them decarbonize their operations. We also know that clean energy offtake agreements can support the financing of renewable projects. To take one example, this energy demands of digital technology companies are rising rapidly. But we are convinced that the sector can play a crucial role in using digital tools for climate action and supporting the development of renewable energy. We have therefore launched the Green Digital Action Declaration, which we call on governments and the private sector to endorse. Ladies and gentlemen, these initiatives also support the COP29 presidency's wider plan to enhance ambition and enable action. To enhance ambition, we are calling all parties to submit 1.5 aligned nationally determined contributions before February 2025 deadline. These NDCs should integrate ambitious but achievable renewable energy targets. This is a critical moment to translate global targets into national action plans. To enable action, climate finance is essential in supporting developing countries in their transition to renewable energy systems and will be centerpiece at COP29. The COP29 presidency's top negotiating priority is to negotiate a new collective quantified goal on climate finance. This goal must be fair and ambitious and adequate to meet the scale of the challenge before us. Determination and leadership are now needed from all parties to bridge the gaps that still divide us in this critical final phase. Dear colleagues, at the third meeting of the Board for Loss and Damage Fund in Baku, we made significant progress. We successfully laid the foundation for the disbursement of the funds. This breakthrough in Baku marks a crucial step in enabling action on climate change. With nearly 800 million already pledged, the COP29 presidency will work to convert these pledges into actionable funding, supporting communities in need. The Presidency will also call for further contribution to the fund, advancing one of its key objectives as outlined in its first letter to the parties. We must build on this momentum as we look to Baku. Ladies and gentlemen, the energy transition is a vital opportunity for sustainable development. We should all feel the spirit of urgency and ambition that billions of people expect from us. We should work hardly to enhance ambition and enable action so that we can keep 1.5 within reach. Thank you.
Please welcome Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency, Francesco La Camera. Special Advisor to the UN Secretary General on Climate and Just Transition, Silwan Hart. Managing Director and CEO of the Macquarie Group, Shumara Wickramanayake, in conversation with Chair of the Global Renewables Alliance, Julia Sauter.
Wow, you can really feel the renewable energy in this room. Really want to, again, the Global Renewables Summit is the first public-private summit to discuss the progress, opportunities, and challenges to triple renewable energy by 2030. How did we do this? Well, the leadership in this room. Mike and the Bloomberg team have done a phenomenal job. President von der Leyen, President Ruto, Prime Minister Motley, His Excellency Dr. Sultan, and His Excellency Mr. Babayev. Thank you all very much for your comments, and we look forward to the dialogue on stage today to really highlight the public and private partnership. So let's turn to our esteemed panelists to dive into what you've heard and how you'd like to react. So Shumara, and it's great to be on stage with friends who are all motivated to make a difference, so thank you all for all the amazing work you do. We heard from our esteemed leaders about the importance of unlocking finance for renewables. Each one of them addressed this. And as a leading investor of renewable energy, what's your take on the main barriers to mobilize finance? And could you give us an example of an innovative leadership and program and partnership that you've developed and deployed?
Yeah, happy to do that. And you were asking about barriers, and all of us in the private sector, I think, would be familiar with the short-term, sort of more cyclical barrier we've had in terms of supply chain disruption post-COVID and the inflation factors that have made it more expensive to deliver these renewable projects that had reached competitive cost. Now, happily, that's coming out of the cycle, and we're finding that actually this year we've had more renewable energy projects put on than any previous year. I think in solar, it's been record 117 gigawatts, 445 of wind, 70 of batteries, and that's partly happening because the costs have managed to come down again, as Dr. Sultan said, but also because we've had response on the demand side, because there is demand. So private sector off-takers have stepped up PPA prices, but so have governments, whether it's been rounds of offshore wind projects that have run in the UK, New Jersey, New York. They've lifted the prices that have been offered from previous rounds, and frankly still within a competitive range of the levelized cost of electricity, so they've been pragmatic but have brought the projects on. So that's been helping a lot in terms of the renewable energy projects going. But I think where we, the private sector, have a role to play is going to those new frontiers, not to the areas that are already de-risked and the default choice of rational actors. So in energy, it's things like firming solutions, because solar and wind are already very cheap choice of energy. In transport, it's long-haul transport, because passenger EVs are competitive, but getting into aviation and into shipping fuels is challenging. In agriculture, it's future feed that's lower methane emissions, or it's reducing the chemicals in agriculture. So you were asking about examples of projects we do, and I think there were comments made about the private sector's role is to create the projects and the participation. So for example, in developed countries like France, we've been working with the government there on a gigafactory project with an organization called Verkor that we're helping them scale up one of their first big projects, helping them get land, get permitting with the government, get Renault as an off-taker, get MDBs in to support getting in other private sector investors. But then also in developing countries like in India, where Bloomberg's been supporting the Climate Finance Leadership Initiative, helping them roll out electric heavy vehicles where the upfront capital cost is very high compared to passenger vehicles, by getting financing facilities together with the incredible work of the MDBs now post the Private Sector Investment Lab. We're offering a lot more, but with the Green Climate Fund, we and they are putting the equity into a leasing facility and leveraging that up so that we can cover the capital cost up front and then help scale that as people start leasing vehicles. And then in places like, I've just arrived this morning from Mexico, we're doing an e-methanol project there with the IFC called Pacifico Mexanol, where we are helping again bring the cost of e-methanol down for shipping, where there are regulations requiring shipping companies to reduce their emissions, but we really need to make all these things a default choice of rational actors by doing the early projects to de-risk them. And that's the sort of role we think we in the private sector can play, is coming up with, once the enabling environments are created and the MDBs are there ready to fund, creating the projects that are going to actually push the frontiers forward in the new areas that we're going to have to get across in all these sectors if we are going to deliver the climate targets.
I'm really glad that you're highlighting how much amazing work you're doing around the world, and really noting that you're looking at all sectors, and you're really tying together the hard aspects at the beginning to really put that capital up front, and working with partners like the multiple development banks and many others to show that there are off-takers and that there is a process for this. So again, appreciate all the work you're doing in India and Mexico and around the world. The Global Renewables Alliance is a consortium of 6 global organizations, all representing the private sector, who work in partnership. And it's really important to have this public-private alliance to really look at how we're going to address the urgent action that was commented by all of the speakers earlier. So Selvin, from the perspective of the United Nations, what more can be done by different players? We heard from Shumara that there are different actors, but we feel like governance can do more, multilateral development banks can do more, the private sector still can overcome barriers of clean energy transition, and we still need to scale up investments. So can you give us an example of how the United Nations is helping?
Thank you so much, Julia, and it's a pleasure to be here. But before giving you that example, I really just want to thank you, Bruce, and the other colleagues really for not only convening this summit, but for your advocacy over the years. And as we celebrate the achievement in the outcome at COP28, as well as the record deployment of renewables over the course of the last few years, I think that we need to have 3 reality checks. One, despite the record deployment of renewables, we're still not displacing fossil fuels as fast as we need to keep the 1.5-degree goal of the Paris Agreement within reach. And breaching that goal has massive consequences for a livable and sustainable planet. And many of the speakers have highlighted some of the challenges. Secondly, the policy landscape in both advanced and developing and emerging economies, that policy landscape remains inconsistent, incoherent, and uncertain. And I'll give 2 examples. Fossil fuel subsidies. Countries are spending 9 times more to make fossil fuels less expensive than cleaner and more sustainable alternatives. And on fossil fuel expansion plans, despite net zero commitments and targets, despite advocating for a tripling of renewables and transitioning away from fossil fuels, we're seeing record fossil fuel expansion plans in many of the G7 and advanced economies, right? Totally inconsistent with the goals of the Paris Agreement. And third is the fairness perspective that many have mentioned before. Last year, record deployment of renewables, and countries representing 2/3 of the global population attracted a mere 15% of renewable energy and clean energy investments last year. Outside of China and the advanced economies, the rest of the world, and as President Ruto said, many countries have not even started the race to net zero, let alone meaningfully participate in the race to net zero. So I think that we need these reality checks really to chart a way forward to achieve these goals, but more importantly, the 1.5-degree goal of the Paris Agreement. And we have a number of important opportunities over the course of the coming months and years. One is the nationally determined contributions. How can we get countries to not only embed these the renewable energy goals, but also the policies, provide policy consistency and certainty on the direction of travel. What will they do on price and carbon? What do they intend to do on fossil fuel subsidies? How do they intend to address, and my friend and colleague Francesco, how do they intend to transform energy systems? What are the investments they will make in grid modernization, strengthening, extension, storage, these really important aspects of the energy system? So I think we all need to collaboratively work together to shine a light on the NDC preparatory process. And we need, from a variety and different types of countries, to show what a good, investable, implementable NDC looks like. What does it look like for an advanced economy? What does it look like for an emerging economy? What does it look like for a country highly dependent on fossil fuels? Because their transition pathways will be different. What does it look like for a least developed country in a small island developing state? What does good look like? And third, we also need to using the NDC process, and we need to promote international cooperation and collaboration. You know, we're living in a very divided and complex and complicated world. And on these issues, we need collaboration and cooperation more than ever. And this was a central theme of the Secretary General's speech at the opening of the General Assembly this morning. And the United Nations, we're all in. We're working through the climate promise that our colleagues from UNDP are leading to help and support developing countries prepare their next generation of NDCs. And on some of the difficult and complex issues like critical energy transition minerals, we know that demand for critical energy transition minerals will increase significantly as the pace of the transition accelerates. We know where they are. They're primarily in resource-rich countries in the developing world. And we know that, as President Ruto said and as the Secretary General has said, with this increased demand, we cannot repeat the mistakes of the past where developing countries are relegated to the bottom of supply chains based on an exploitative model of extraction. So in response to calls from resource-rich developing countries, and many of our leaders in civil society and indigenous people, the Secretary General convened a panel on critical energy transition minerals to address some of these complex issues, really, and to come up with a plan and a blueprint for how we can ensure we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. And this panel was co-chaired by South Africa and the European Commission. We had representatives from indigenous people, young people, the industry, civil society, labor unions, etc. Really, and they've come up with a plan and a blueprint that now needs to be operationalized. So UN, we can't force anyone to do anything, but we will convene. We will continue to convene on these very difficult issues. We will work hand in glove with developing countries really to ensure that their voice is given expression globally, but also help them to create the plans and support them at every step of the way.
And the power of convening that the UN brings really led to the success last year of the partnerships that really supported the tripling renewables and doubling down of energy efficiency. It does give us hope, as Prime Minister Motley was saying, we can't get rid of this, but we need to continue to act and hold each other accountable, because NDCs are a critical part of the toolkit, and we need to show how renewable energy actually empowers and really can kind of address the different opportunities that can be provided. I like, Sylvan, how you called out we need to really own the fossil fuel subsidies are still part of the equation, and we need to really look at fairness and not repeat the mistakes of the past. So I really look forward to the UN continuing its leadership to bring all these groups together to hold us all accountable in this public-private partnership. So thank you. Francisco, Irene has been a great partner to the Global Renewables Alliance, to the UN, and many others in the room, looking at financing and many other reports that you published to really call to action all the different components of how renewables provide the value, are beneficial to communities around the world. We've heard from all of our esteemed leaders earlier about the importance of unlocking finance and also about their clean energy ambition. And so really want to see, you've highlighted in many reports certain policies, best practices. What can governments put in place to attract more investments in renewable energy?
So first of all, I wish to thank the people of Bloomberg, the people of GRA, and the partners for bringing us to make this call for renewables. I think it was very challenging. Naturally, as has been said by Mrs. Motley, the question of finance is also linked to the overcoming of barriers that are hampering the capacity of renewables to spread at the speed and scale that is needed to be in line with the achievement of the Paris Agreement goals. This has to be very well understood. So there are structural barriers that we have to overcome. The first is the infrastructure. Without grids that are interconnected, they are flexible, they are balanced, we cannot have more renewables into the system. It's very evident. And look at what's happening in Africa and Southeast Asia. The cost of money is very high. But always I like to repeat that the cost of money is the fever, it's not the illness. So we have to cure the illness. In Africa, the illness is that we have to provide for companies that invest to plug their electricity into the system. And we have to change attitude. We are calling the multilateral financial institution to understand that working on development means in this part of the world to work on strengthening and building the infrastructure that is needed to have interconnectivity, flexibility, and balancing to the system. This is very, very relevant in our point of view. The second, that has been said by everyone today, is that still the market is designed for a world that is centralized and based on fossil fuel. We have not market design for the centralized energy system. We still make the price with the cost marginal approach. There's no work for renewables that have the high cost at the start and the low cost during the maintenance and the management. So this has to be changed for adding more investment. The market should be designed differently. We have posed too much attention to the supply side of the problem and less to the demand side of the problem. Decarbonization of the existing heavy hard sector needs market design that allow for this to happen. The third barrier that has been mentioned by Ms. Motley too is on the capacity. So the decentralized energy system is good for the energy security. It's good for distributed benefits because it creates more jobs. It's good because it's cleaner. But at the same time, it's more difficult to manage. So we need institutions that may be capable to govern this complexity. And we need also the skilled workforce. Many companies can do more, but they don't have the skilled workforce. Sometimes they don't have the professional. Also, the university degree should be updated. So we have to fight to overcome this barrier for having more finance flowing. Then naturally there is the risking, there is the leverage of different funds, but the structural barrier should be at the first point. And as Arena, what we are trying also to do with, in this respect, when you talk about finance, is our financial platform. We have 14 partners. We have commitment that may equal more or less with the Green Climate Fund. We have an investment forum that's been just mentioned by President Ruto that will be held in Nairobi from the 12th to the 16th of October. All companies, all investors are invited to be there. We will present a very good pipeline of projects. And more important, we will have the first investment forum during the COP. That's really something that is absolutely new. And my last comment, if I can, today, we wanted to do just today, we launched the new, our new report on cost. It's unbelievable that also last year, after many years that we have assisted to a decrease of cost of renewables, we have a 2-digit decrease of cost. Wow. So there is no doubt that the most economical way to produce electricity today is renewable in all parts of the world. And in a large part of the world, it's more convenient to close an old fossil fuel plant and put a renewable plant in place that will be more economical. So we have all for doing well, but we need more attention on the policy aspect, prepare the ground for more finance to come.
Thank you, Francesco, and thank you for focusing on the flexibility we need to adapt to this transition. And for others, it's not a transition, it's a whole new platform. Yeah. And speaking about how costs continue to come down for renewable energy, which is critical for continuing to de-risk and bringing more convening powers to finance different initiatives. And also to bringing up energy security. Every single country around the world is looking at energy security, jobs, and how they can protect and grow their local economies. And so the convening power again of the UN brings us all together to highlight why this is so important. Just wanted to sum it up by saying, you know, we've heard about embarking on delivering change, positive urgency. We heard about avoiding the mistakes of the past and that there will be a lot of financial opportunity and returns in Africa and many other countries. And we heard about not losing hope, but really looking at fossil fuel subsidies and how it's holding us back. And really looking at not recolonizing, that is unacceptable. And then looking at how we need to really look at investing in grid structures. What is the role of artificial intelligence and the global south? And how do we, throughout this conversation, we've talked about financing, but also the accountability tool of NDCs. You know, working with public and private partnerships are so essential. And just want to highlight that the private industry is definitely here to work with the public entities and partner that over 200 organizations from around the world published this yesterday and signed in the New York Times, building upon the work we did last year of announcing the tripling renewables target and energy efficiency, and now showing with our partners, we are looking at now delivering change. So taking NDCs to the next level of showing that we are committed to work with governments around the world to make sure that we have a fair, just, and equitable system that really works for all communities. So I just want to thank all of you. I want to thank Bloomberg Philanthropies, the amazing GRA team for all the work and commitment, all of you in the room, because we have to do this together. So we look forward to working with you, holding each other accountable, and taking action today. So thank you all for your time. Look forward to seeing you out there. Appreciate it. Thank you all.